What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with another look at key grade comics. We've got mainly, I think, all 9.8s for this video, and I'm doing kind of a part 2 for the ComicLink auctions that ended in November, end of October, and I also kind of supplemented that with a few key issues that sold on eBay. Some of them were kind of identical to the books on ComicLink, so I wanted to show a comparison on the price points between eBay and ComicLink, and then also just a few other books on eBay that are really big books that sold for big money, but really good deals overall. So let's go ahead and dig right in. The first one, we're going to start off with some Amazing Spider-Man books. First, we got the direct edition of ASM 238, which is the first appearance of Hobgoblin. This is a direct edition, which I do have in my collection. This one sold for $1,600. That's about the same of where this one was selling for last month on ComicLink. Likewise, there was another direct edition that sold on eBay, and this one sold in an auction for $1,750. So that shows you kind of the discount you can get, especially when you're not factoring in on eBay the sales taxes. For me, it's another 9.25% on top of the winning bid, versus ComicLink, where it sold for $150 less. I don't have to pay sales taxes, and there's only a 3% buyer's premium. So big savings if you had bought that one on ComicLink versus eBay. On eBay as well, there was a newsstand edition, which I'd love to get at some point. This one sold for $2,380 on eBay. There was another one that sold on ComicLink last month for about $2,200. So again, on eBay, you tend to have to pay a little bit more on top of the sales taxes on that. But that was a beautiful example of the newsstand edition of ASM 238. Next up, we've got a newsstand edition of ASM 252, the first appearance of the black costume on Spider-Man. Beautiful newsstand edition, and it did have the custom New York City Spider-Man logo on there. So beautiful example. That one sold for $1,500, almost the exact same price that it sold for last month on ComicLink. It might have been like $1,550 or so, but pretty much holding steady versus last month. So maybe we've reached a bottom on this book, and I think it's a good time to buy it, either in a direct or a newsstand, but I definitely would love to get a newsstand next year. Likewise, here's a direct edition. So this just shows you, again, the example of buying on ComicLink versus buying on eBay. This was the direct edition, and it sold for almost the same price as the newsstand edition. So this one sold for $14.25 in an auction. It did have the custom kind of black Spider-Man costume label, which really looks awesome. I love the spider webs on the grading label there. That looks really great. So $14.25 is too high, though, for the direct edition. I was thinking more like $1,100, where this one has been selling on ComicLink here recently. But $14.25 versus going on ComicLink and getting the newsstand, the slightly harder to find newsstand, for $1,500. I mean, that's a big difference for your money. Next up, I've got several different examples of the direct edition of Amazing Spider-Man 300 that sold. And on ComicLink, this one sold for $30.50. Although it did have kind of a strange logo. I don't know why anyone would want the red and blue Spider-Man custom label for the first appearance of Venom, where Spider-Man's wearing his black logo. That to me seems kind of a mismatch to me, but that one did sell for $30.50. And then on eBay, several different examples sold. Again, the direct edition sold for $32.50, and then another one sold for $32.01. If you're going to get the custom label, this is the one you'd want to get, the one with the black Spider-Man outfit, to kind of match the cover there. That makes a little bit more sense to me. But $32.01, $32.50, and $30.50 on ComicLink will give you a nice tight price range for Amazing Spider-Man 300 in the direct edition. I did also see a newsstand edition of Amazing Spider-Man 300, which is a lot tougher to find. That one sold on Instagram in a 9.8 grade newsstand edition for $13,000 or thereabouts. So pretty big price premium you got to pay for the newsstand edition for ASM 300. Next up, we've got this Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars number 8 in the direct edition. This is the origin of the alien symbiote that eventually becomes Venom. Pretty nice looking example. This one is one you really got to check out the centering on, because it can get overwrapped and things like that. But this was a beautiful example, freshly graded, and it sold for $4.25, which is a great deal. That's really come down a lot over the last 6 to 9 months. But a direct edition, $4.25 was the selling price. I also had two different sales for Batman Adventures number 12 in the direct edition. The first appearance of Harley Quinn in comics. This is one I do have in my collection. This one appeared to have a scratch on the case. so you really got to zoom in on these photos, but still a very nice example. That one sold for $21.50, and then on eBay, another one sold in an auction in the direct edition for $23.80. So it does seem like, in general, on eBay, you're going to be paying $100 or $200 more for a lot of these big books, plus sales taxes. So when possible, try to aim for ComicLink or Comic Connect or Collectors Comics run by David over there. Heritage might be another good option, but they have a big, premium there. And you do also have to pay sales taxes over at Heritage. So keep that in mind. Star Wars #1 in a 9.8 with white pages. This was nicely centered and freshly graded. This one sold for $36.50 on eBay. Pretty decent deal there, and that kind of ties into what I told you last month on ComicLink, that perfectly centered copies without any bleed through on the Star Wars logos. They seem to be going in that $3,500 to $3,700 range. You might get as low as $3,000 on Instagram or on some of these other kind of alternative websites, but $36.50. For a very clean example of Star Wars #1. So that's come back down just a little bit. Captain America 241 is one you don't see very often, and this is the harder to find newsstand, although not terribly hard since it's a 1980s book. This is the first time that the Punisher and Captain America meet and fight. And it's a very tough book to find. Not many of these in a 9.8 grade on the census. And it sold for big money, $938. There was another sale 3 months ago at $865. So this book is kind of going against the trend of big key issue comics slowly dropping in price. This one's actually bumping up a little bit, $938. And it was admittedly the newsstand edition versus the direct edition that sold 3 months ago at $865. So it's a slight premium for the newsstand, but a great book and very, very tough to find in a very high grade at 9.8. DC Comics presents #26. This is the first appearance of the new Teen Titans, first appearance of Raven, Cyborg, and Starfire. This was the harder to find newsstand edition, freshly graded, pretty decently centered, had a little bit of overwrap at the top, but nothing terrible. Beautiful example. And that one has come down a little bit as well. I think we were at around $1,900 3 or 4 months ago. Then it dropped to $1,600 last month, and now it's selling for $1,300 in a newsstand. So that one continues to drop like a rock. Here's an interesting one that I really like. This is a Terry Austin cover, Detective Comics #475. It's kind of a classic cover. It's got the Joker holding two fish as pistols, I guess. I don't know, but it's a very strange cover, but really, really cool. And this one, it's just one of those timeless kind of classic covers. And it sold in an auction on ComicLink for $1,006. Next up was Red Sonja #1. This is the first comic book, I believe, devoted to Red Sonja. I think she appeared in a Marvel premiere issue, but this Red Sonja #1 is kind of a cool cover that it really gives off the 70s vibes with that cover. It's got a unicorn there. It's just one of those issues that I've looked at and kind of targeted that I just never pulled the trigger on. It was always kind of $450 to $500. Well, this one sold for $310, which I thought was a banger of a deal. Great deal on that one. That's a price I would have paid all day long. Next up, Wolverine #1, the first ongoing Wolverine series. This is the first Wolverine as the Patch. This was the direct edition that sold for, it was in a 9.8, it sold for $295. We just documented on the channel a newsstand edition that sold for like $800 or $900, something really big. So the direct edition is definitely dropping. It was kind of going $325 to $350. This one sold for $295. Next up, a big one. This was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #2. This is the first appearance of April O'Neil in comics, and it's a very tough to find example. I believe this is supposed to be Shredder's claws, and it's reflecting the turtles in the back of in the claws. I think that's what that is, or maybe it's a shoulder emblem on Shredder. But very cool book. Kind of a strange cover relative to #1, but it still sold for $28.58. That's down a little bit. The FMV on Go Collect was around $3,000, $3,500, somewhere in that ballpark. So this one did sell for $28.58. I've got a bunch more, and then we'll wrap it up. Next up, we've got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 in the 4th print. So this is one that's maybe a little easier to find than the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd print, and the price reflects that. It's got a different color, different color cover versus the black and white cover for the 1st through the 3rd prints. But this was a 9.8, and it sold for $436. That's right in line with market. $450 is about what they sell for, maybe $475 on eBay. So $436 was a pretty fair deal on that one. Next up, TMNT Adventures #1. This was the harder to find Canadian price variant for TMNT Adventures #1, and that one sold for 860 Canadian dollars, which is 629 US dollars. You can probably expect to pay 400 to 425, for just the standard US release of this book. In the direct edition, in the newsstand, they can approach, quite a bit more money. But the Canadian price variant is one that doesn't come up very often, and that one did sell for $629 at an auction. Next up, Incredible Hulk #271, the first appearance of Rocket Raccoon. This one was the newsstand edition as well, so really nice example. $1,110 for that one. In a direct edition, this one goes kind of $800 or so, maybe less. But that newsstand is a little tougher to find. It was from 1982, and it did sell for $1,110. Next up is the newsstand edition for New Mutants '98, the first appearance of Deadpool. The direct editions come up all the time, every single week on eBay and every single month on ComicLink, but the newsstand does not, and the price reflects that. The direct edition goes $1,100 to $1,200, and this newsstand sold for quite a premium, $2,651 in an auction on 31 bids. That one just ended last Tuesday, but a very tough to find one. I don't particularly like the label, the custom label with the X-Men on there. I think, to me, it would make more sense to have just a plain label or, find some Deadpool label. I think all the Deadpool labels are retired right now, unfortunately. So, to me, I'd rather have just a plain label than have the X-Men on there, but that's just me. But still, it's a nice newsstand edition, and it sold for $26.51. Another newsstand edition, this was a 9.8 for Transformers #1, another tough one to find in the newsstand. $26.49 on that one. Team CGC 9.8, Jerry over there, he covered a recent direct edition that sold for like $11.40. So a big premium relative to the direct edition for the newsstand. Freshly graded. It looked to be pretty well centered on there. Maybe not perfect, but pretty well centered. And it did sell for $26.50 in an auction on eBay. And then finally, this was a steal. This one was Aliens #1 in a 9.8. They are very tough to find in a 9.8 grade. All black cover, first comic book appearance of Aliens. And there are less than a handful of these in a 9.8 grade because it's a Dark Horse book, low printed, and it's also the very black cover. I didn't look up the census count for the 9.8s for this book, but I can promise you there are not many of these out there. And this one sold for $2,700 in an auction. And I was talking to my buddy Jason about this. He said, if I had known about it, I would have bought this all day long for $2,700. They typically sell for quite a bit more. So pretty interesting to see how far that one has fallen as well. Pretty cool cover as well. I like the cover art on that one. And again, it was a Dark Horse Comics book from 1988. $2,700 took that home. Only one bid in an auction on eBay. Thanks as always for watching for this look at CGC 9.8 graded comics on ComicLink and eBay, and I'll be back soon.